The one word Tartarians, the greatest civilization ever to be erased from history. I've came across a really interesting book. It really changes the way we see a lot of things. Now, I've always questioned why. I've seen some interesting things, and I've seen buildings buried underneath other buildings. So, give an example. I've seen where they were digging, for example, in Italy, in France, in Russia. They were digging for different in Germany. They were digging for in Rome. In Italy in particular. I've seen this. They were digging. They had this massive construction site, and to build some tall buildings, some skyscrapers, right? And so they discovered underneath what they were digging is about 10 meters below the surface are the structures. You know, they discovered walls. They discovered walls like proper structures, and there's so many examples of structures found underneath. Now, when I came across this book, it says something really interesting here. In the chapters, it says mud flood and liquefaction. And he says, why all the half-floor first floors? Civilizations 200 feet below the sea, the Great Reset of 1811, 1812, Tartarian culture, maps and flags of the Great Tartaria, griffins, symbols of the Great Tartaria, energy star forts. It's very interesting because in France you see this, not just in France but all around the world, but you see these patterns. You see these gardens that have from above, which is really interesting because when they were built long ago, like if you have a drone now and you film this from above, you see that it's got a pattern of a frequency. You know, it's very interesting as is the same thing as when I'm not sure if you tried the experiment with the sand, where you put on this square thing, and when you change the frequency, it creates a pattern. But you have to put sand on it, and every time you change it to a different frequency, and through music, it changes to a pattern. You know, and the higher the frequency is, the worse the frequency, the worse the pattern is, right? So, for example, like for some reason, rock music seems to have the worst pattern. There's a reason why rock music makes people crazy. You know, classical music has the most beautiful pattern. But what is interesting about this energy star force and the fact that I've seen this long ago before I looked into this. And I saw these patterns. I couldn't believe. I said, why were they built like that? Why were those forts? And they said, well, to defend against this. Yes, but they have an interesting pattern. It's like the cathedral. The cathedrals, you go to cathedrals and you see they have this, each one of them very unique. You go to York, the one in England, but the cathedrals are all over Europe. And you go to them and you see that they have different, the round thing at the top there, it has a different pattern. It has a different, and somehow it's like each one of them represents a different frequency. As in, like somehow those cathedrals were musical, and then it's healing centers, animal healing center of the world, cinematic gardens. Oh, look at this. Sorry, cymatic gardens to heal the soul, the healing resonance of churches, magnifying opera ceiling pipe organs. These are things that I thought, whoa, like the magnificent worldwide Tartarian architecture. There's also this kind of architecture that was exactly the same everywhere, you know. And a lot of people tell you that they said, oh, well, somehow back in the 17th century or so, but oh God, there's so many other before that. I mean, you go like, I don't know, something doesn't add up with this, right? I mean, when they tell you that they work 500 years on a cathedral, or the one in Barcelona, they said they work 500 years. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you can just have the same people working. These are numbers that they were given to you. The same as when they're telling you that 1 million years ago, or this bone comes from 1 million years ago. I mean, how on earth can you date something like that? Like, how can you go so far back? By what standard do you judge or you measure some of that? I mean, they will tell you, people that have no clue, they'll just tell you, oh, well, they have the technology, they have this. How do you even know? Like, these are just theories, the same as when they tell you about Big Bang, that 3 point something billion years ago, there was an explosion. How can you tell what happened in the past when you weren't even there? Like, this is what people need to understand. You can't go back in the past. You can't measure. You don't know what's happened in the past. There's no way. There's no way you can know something that has happened even though you weren't there. And people take it for granted. This is just a theory created by some people. And people believe it to the full extent. Anyway, coming back to this. And there's also the fact, look, chapter 11 talks about peace on earth, free energy everywhere. The origins of electricity, wireless technology, and weather modification in the 19th century. Well, now we know about weather modification. This has been proven many times. Harvesting lighting, harvesting magneticity through copper domes. Oh, copper extracting and processing was not easy even today. Skyscrapers are energy harvesters. Yeah, it makes sense the way they put the free travel anywhere. There were giants among the US. Now, this is another interesting. Christ. We didn't talk about giants, right? The Bible mentions giants. Like, there's so many, there's so many, even in the beginning of the 20th century when they were building the United States, they're in the newspapers. There were a lot of stories about the fact that they discovered giant bones, but yet they somehow uncovered this. Like, they just brushed it under the carpet somehow, not to make it. But I found it rather strange, because you as a Christian, you believe, or even I suppose Muslims believe, because even in the Quran is mentioned about giants. But the whole Christianity, like everyone in all these countries, they say, oh, I'm a Christian, all that, but you don't believe in giants. But yet the Bible mentions giants. It talks about giants. Like, you remember when they said that they were just exploring this new land, and they said that they see us as that creature that flies. What is it called? Locusts? I think it was, I can't remember who was there, but they said the citizens of that land, they are very tall. There's a chapter in the Bible when the Israelis were looking for a new land. I remember that long ago. And they said that they saw these creatures, and it says, in their eyes, we look very small. We look like insects or something like that. And that leads me to believe that, and that's in the Bible, right? And not just that, there's so many more other. I mean, think about the before the flood, Noah's flood. Like, you had giants, Nephilims, the fallen angels that took women out their wives, and then they gave birth to these giants, and then they were eating animals, and they started eating humans. I mean, these stories are just all over, and I just can't believe this mentions all this, right? Impossible engineering, Great Wall of China, the Grand Canal of China, precision cut massive stones worldwide by whom, with what tools? Deep in the ground cathedrals and waterworks. This is a really interesting book. This is absolutely fascinating, because it goes really deep into so many things. But one thing that I start asking or questioning is the architecture. All these buildings, I mean, it's just, you see so many buildings, so many like they had cities that they had lighting all over. Like, they had the buildings had lights all over. And I've seen it many times. I've seen Look at this. People sent to go for a glimpse. And apparently some of the buildings were demolished. Don't know the reasons. There's also a story. Oh, Romanian giant legends. Yeah. Depending on the region of Romania where the legends come from, there are different names for giants. As Tartari, for example, a number of usually covering skin. Yeah, for instance, when locusts tried to plant apple trees on a hill, they accidentally discovered humanoid skeletons, all of over 2.4 meters, 8 all tall, long tree fragments. I mean, there's so many stories. There's so many pictures as well. And also, there's a story not long ago, I think 2012, the giant of Kandahar. Like some Americans, SEAL forces, special forces, something like that. They went in Afghanistan and they found his. They had 6 fingers, 6. Look, I don't know. I'm just asking questions. Whoever's watching this and things, I'm just asking questions. I've just heard stories. So you look at yourself and see. I think it's all connected. You see. Look at this. There were giants among us. Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Men of renown. And this is in Genesis 6:4, so it's in the Bible. It talks about this. And also just beautiful architecture, like even the street lighting, like look at the street lighting how it was back in there. I mean, but this, we're probably going to go more into this. Probably should take each chapter and talk about it. Because it's absolutely fascinating. This is called the one word Tartarians. Now, I've read many books, but this seems to be really interesting. Loving healing centers. It says, with the right frequency or sound, one can heal people, grow bigger food, levitate objects, turn lead into gold, and much, much more amazing stuff. Imagine that. Oh, look at the forts here. This is another interesting, the forts that I was telling you about. That they have different frequency. Let's see if you can see it there. They have different patterns. You might traveling around Europe, I have discovered many interesting things. And I couldn't explain them. I couldn't really explain because there's always the same story, but when you start to dig into it, you realize there's a lot more to it. You know, there's always the same story, some belonging to some king and blah, blah, blah. And it has no meaning, no frequency, no nothing. It's just random. Everything is just random. You know, this is the basic story that you hear from every place you go. You know, you don't hear anything. Because then you start wondering, you start looking and you think, how is that even, possible? Or I think a lot of people start asking questions and they just don't go, because a lot of truth has come out, right? There's a lot of doctors, a lot of scientists, there's a lot of research going around this, and I think there's a lot of truth has come out. The question is, why has this been hidden, or maybe the knowledge wasn't there? But I've started to ask these questions myself. I've started all my readings and all this, and I think the more you read, the more you kind of discover things, and the more you ask questions. Like someone who doesn't read will look at this video and think, what is this guy on about? But when you start asking questions, I think, I think it's quite interesting. And I think there's more to it.